Well, David, I wanted to tell you I really loved the movie. I watched it today, and I was extremely moved by it. It has a very transfixing and lyrical feel to it. How did you happen on the tone for this story?
The tone was something that I was always very dead set on. I wanted the whole movie to feel very elegiac and to feel, the whole movie is about consequences and the aftermath of something that's already happened. And I wanted the whole, and it's also run through and through with, romance and a love story. And so I wanted the entire thing to just feel like have an afterglow sort of tone and to feel wistful and that was really just it's one of those things that you talk about and you play music for people and you try to find weird sort of off left of center ways to approach that, because you never want to just say, well, this isn't, I want this to feel sad or I want this to feel elegiac. You just want to create something that you can't quite describe in words. And so giving people a song to listen to was very helpful, and giving finding pictures, photographs to look at that sort of represented that tone, and that it was all stuff that I shared with the cast and the crew, and we just talked about it without using specific terms, because as soon as you try and nail it down, it never quite works, because the tone is so fleeting and so hard to wrap your hands around. And so it was really just trying to just go with gut instinct and feel what find things that feel right and find things that speak to that and that I could then use to communicate to everyone that we're working with. And then everyone just kind of got in the same wavelength, and we all just started to work in tandem and work in unison, and everything that everyone was doing in collaboration worked towards achieving that.
If the film doesn't adhere to normal plot beats, and it never overstates or over-explains the emotions or the actions of the characters, which I found really refreshing. Is this the kind of thing that you're on the lookout to avoid when you're in the writing process?
Yeah, I'm of two minds about it. And one is that I don't like to necessarily be surprised all the time when I go to the movies. Sometimes I want to see something where I know what's going on and I know where the story's going, so that I can sort of just get caught up in the rhythm of it and not really pay attention to the plot points. And then the other thing that I like is to not really be given exposition, and to just sort of be dropped into something and watch something as it's occurring and sort of figure out the details as it transpires. And I really like living in a world temporarily that feels like other people are living in it. So they might reference something that's happened and we have no idea what they're talking about, but they'll talk about it as if they know, because they do. And that's all we really get. And we can kind of like gradually accumulate little details and pick up more and more. And by the end of the movie, you might have a better idea of who you're watching a movie about than you did at the beginning. But at the same time, you're never going to have all the details. And it's more about just, I really like taking what you're given on the screen and just limiting yourself to that, and not really delving into the past or delving into backstory or delving into exposition, just letting it be what the facts are at the time and letting that be the story.
Yeah, I really appreciated that. It kept the film fresh for me. I would imagine a lot of people are going to mention that the movie reminds them of Badlands, but for my part, I saw it as kind of an update of an old Western, where kind of many of the kind of distracting elements are kind of stripped away, and all you're left with is the moral choices of the characters. Would you say that you're a Western fan in any way?
Yeah, I absolutely am. And actually, since we started editing the movie, I've been going back and watching a lot of, catching up on Westerns I hadn't seen and things that I had seen and forgotten about. I've been like on a Howard Hawks bin lately. And I love, when I moved to Texas when I was 7 years old, and at first I was terrified of it, and then I gradually realized that I liked it, and then I realized that it was a deep part of me. Over the course of the years that I've spent there, it's become a very intrinsic part of me, and sort of the Western ethos is part of the character of Texas, and that feeds into the type of story that I like and the type of narrative that I like, and I love the mythology of it, and I wanted to do a film that honored that mythology without actually ever be. It's not really a Western. I think I was reading somewhere that a Western is any movie that exists before automobiles or and and this movie certainly has no horses, none of those things, but it still has the tropes of a Western. It has the same characters, and the moral choices that you mentioned. I'm really glad you mentioned that, because that is something that rings thoroughly through this movie and an entire history of movies in the past, and a lot of those, are Westerns, where you distill, things down to very simple moral choices, and yet they're still, incredibly complex because they're so life or death. And a lot of times when you set a very intimate moral choice against a wide epic landscape, it gives it a grandeur to it, and that's something that Westerns always did very well. And I certainly wanted to do a little bit of that here as well.
Yeah. Period-wise, the film feels extremely authentic. It kind of reminded me like of those 80s John Sayles movies, where they did so much with such a low budget. I'm interested in the challenges you face doing a period film like this with so many locations as well, which can get expensive on such a low budget.
I really credit my production designer, Jade Healy, with nailing all of the locations with and achieving that period detail, and also my costume designer Małgorzata Terzanska, who they both had an incredibly limited budget and just scoured our the city that we were shooting in and all of the surrounding areas, and to find locations and to find clothes and to find things that we could get for very little money, and especially with locations, finding things that fit or that were already pretty much all the way there. The farmhouse being the key one. That was like pretty much as it was. We didn't really have to do much to that place, and we just found it, and it was perfect. And then Ruth's house was another one where we found a house, and the house was good, but we had to put up new siding inside and get get it to look like a 1970s household. And I don't know how they did it. I'd walk into the sets every day, and because we were shooting so fast and had so many sets, a lot of times I wouldn't see them until we got there to shoot. I'd see them before Jade had turn them into whatever they were going to be, but then I'd get there and they were fully dressed, and she just magically was able to achieve that look and that period sensibility, and then we did have quite a few locations, and it was a challenge to get from one to the other and to get them all in, but you just trust your collaborators, and you trust the people who are planning the shoot, your unit production manager and your producers and your AD, and you plan things as thoroughly as possible, and just you would hop, skip, and jump from one to the next, and it was a shame because all the locations were so wonderful. You didn't want to spend a week there just shooting them and luxuriating in them, and we'd be there for like a day at a time and then be on and out of it. So it was very bittersweet.
Right. I was, photographically too, the film. A lot of period films these days, to me, aren't that great looking, because they tend to look at anything that's not of the past 2 decades as being, everything looks brown, and sort of dull, like they're trying to recreate sort of a sepia photograph. And this movie doesn't do that. It does still have kind of a burnished antiquity to it, but there's a range of colors that are represented. How did you come to design the look of the photography and so forth?
That was again like a collaboration with both Jade, who would work those colors into the set, and Małgorzata with the costumes, but then with Bradford Young, my cinematographer, we really spent a lot of time doing tests and trying to figure out how we wanted the light to work and the quality we wanted it to have. And we described the movie as like we wanted it to be dirty. We wanted it to be dirty but without being like raw. And we often would just say we want it to look like we're shooting it through a burlap sack and yet still be perfectly clear. And then so we would come up with like weird things like that kind of would give us an idea of what we were after without being anything that you could practically achieve, and then just try to figure out how to get the feel of that. And we boiled it down to like 5 or 6 different colors that we would arrange in order of the story and like how they would seep into the scenes, and it is tempting to just let things go brown because that is such an overriding palette that the browns and the reds that suggest the past so clearly, but we really wanted to try to bring out lots of golds and greens as well and let those seep in, and to really not limit ourselves, but we were very careful with how the color was used so that it wasn't so we never were limiting ourselves in one particular way.
Mm-hmm. Then in the last part of the movie, it gets very dark. I mean, like there's lots of blacks and dark blues in it and so forth. I also wanted to talk. The score is extremely great. I'm sure you're going to get a lot of attention for the score. Did you have any specific directions for your composer? I mean, the hand clapping and just the great guitar work and just subtly colored with the strings and forth. It was terrific.
I didn't have Daniel Hart did the score, and he's someone who I collaborate with because I don't have to give him direction. He just gets it, and he gets what I want out of the music, and he is able to accomplish it. And so he'll just give me, minutes of music at a time, and without having talked to me, and it'll almost always be perfect. And the hand claps were something. I told him, like, I want this to feel regional. I want it to feel like a folk song, but I don't want it to feel like country cliches or anything that we've necessarily heard before, and I wanted to have a sort of classical quality to it as well, and I wanted to achieve these certain crescendos at certain points. So there were things I gave him, but generally I just would I'd be like, okay, now go off and just take all this information that I've given you and come back, and I'm sure it'll be perfect. And it was. And the hand claps were something I never even thought about, but he gave us one of the early tracks, and it was so striking once we dropped that into the edit that became sort of the musical backbone of the entire movie. And I mean, I think the score is our secret weapon with this film. It turned into something that I didn't expect it to be, which was a character in and of itself.
Yeah, and I love the way you mixed it. You mixed it in such a creative way in a lot of the scenes. Where it's underneath the dialogue and it's got kind of an echo to it. It was great. I know that your next film is going to be. I've heard. Is it going to be with Robert Redford?
It is. Right? I hope so. I mean, I'm writing it, and I would love for that to be the next film. I'm really excited that he saw my movie and then wants to make one with me. So that's it's in the works. Here's hoping that it actually gets made. But I would love to make that next.
Is there anything that you see that you want to bring out in his acting style that hasn't been seen yet?
I'm figuring that out as I go. I don't know. I'll have to, you can ask me in about 6 months and I might have a better answer.
Okay.
I'm getting the wrap-up signal at the moment, so.
Okay, well, that's perfect because I was just getting ready to wrap it up anyway, and I wanted to thank you and wanted to compliment you so much on this really, really fine movie.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Okay, you too.